sea journey, pray twice, but pray 3 times if you're going to be married. Small children give you headache, but big children heartache. Both Russian proverbs. What are the 3 rings in marriage? This is a quite popular joke. What are the 3 rings of marriage? Well, you have a engagement ring and wedding ring, and what else? Thank you. Engagement ring, wedding ring, and suffering. Well, this is a really good one. A child asked his father, "Dad, in some countries, men do not know the women they're marrying until the wedding." And you know what the dad said? "Son, it's the same everywhere else." This has some, this is a really profound joke, you know. Anyway, these are the outlines for today's lecture. And, you know, I cannot promise I'll cover sociological perspectives or theories for every topic. But since we're starting on a topic that is non-culture for the first time, I want to sort of show you what sociologists do when they try to understand sort of a social phenomena. Okay? Because you know you ultimately rely on theories to make sense why certain things happen the way they do, right? And so this part will be a little bit dry, but I hope you really understand these. And again, what I do here is just a brief introduction, right? So if you're interested in these, look them up. Okay? Be a good student like me. Always looking up things, always trying to understand things. Okay? Be a good student like me. And you can see what's in store for you today, right? Have you heard of empty shell marriage? What that is? Or show window couple? Or in Korea, we have even a scarier term, ghost couple. You get the drift? This refers to a marriage where there's no real love, but they still live together. In the case of Korea, especially for their children. There's no love, no nothing, but they stick together for the sake of their children. Okay? So we'll talk about why this continues to happen. As promised, 2 sociological theories and perspectives are, I'll start with the first one, and it is called functionalist perspective. Is anyone familiar with this functionalist perspective? Could you tell the class what it means or what it refers to?
Well, it's kind of a more conceptual pedagogy. So it's about how society can ideally and stuff, but it's kind of based around that. So, say like the school and stuff like taking attendance and stuff like that. And it's based on meritocracy, like if you work hard then you can achieve great things and stuff like that. It's a lot of things.
Yes, good try. Well, you can just make use of the term there, function. So, according to this theory, which is very conservative, like she pointed out, everything exists for a reason, and it is usually to serve a positive function. Okay? To sort of share with you what I have, it goes like this. Society, for example, is like an organism. So each aspect of society is interdependent and contributes to society's stability and functioning as a whole. Okay? Or you can, So if you apply functionalism to society, society is like an organism in which, it has all these parts and they are interdependent and they ensure that this organism survives. Okay? So put it another way, functionalism sort of presents the parts of society as organs, okay, that work toward the proper functioning of the body as a whole. So here are 3 examples. So we could talk about other, social institutions, but they all exist for the functioning of a society as a whole, you see. So again, the key word in functionalist perspective is function. So each, let's say, organ or each institution plays a role in making sure that this sort of organism or body or structure functions well. Okay? And they're interdependent, and they again perform important functions. Okay? So again, you cannot really explain functionalist perspective in 2 slides. So I'm just showing you what's out there, but it's your job, I hope. I hope you sort of feel it as your task to look it up as a good student like me. Okay? So, using this functionalist perspective, so again, I left out family on purpose because, that's what I'll be talking about in the next couple of slides. So, education does that for society. Economy does that for society. Religion does that for society. And if you want to talk about political system, right? In the case of democracy, you know what it does for society, right? It ensures, let's say, stability, right? It ensures peace. And even, dictatorship has its functions, right? It also, in its own way, ensures stability and, in a way, peace too, right? So anyway, what are the functions of the family? So I showed you the functions of, education, economy, religion there. What would be the functions of the family? Yes?
I would say creating and raising new generations.
Okay, so reproductive function, right? Good. Anything else? Yes? Sheltering, sort of caring, right? Support. Yes? Anything else? Yes?
Family is the first agent of socialization.
Thank you. Socialization, right? Family teaches you how to behave and what kinds of values you should uphold. It teaches you norms, right? Yes, what else? That's it? 3 functions? Yeah?
Organizing society.
Organizing society. Slightly too broad, but it definitely serves a function for society, definitely, yes. Yeah?
Economic, the family kind of as a unit, like, but economic is one of them.
Okay, sort of economic role. Anyway, here are some functions of the family. Reproduction, as already mentioned. Assignment of status and identity, right? Because as a member of Kim family, I have an identity as a member of my particular, family. That is immediate family, but also my relatives too, right? The Kim clan, kind of, right? And also, being a member of that particular family also gives me a status, right? Whether it's middle class, lower middle, or upper middle, whatever the case may be, right? Care and protection, right? yes, we cannot really imagine our lives without having relied on our parental care, right? Emotional support and so on. That's the third function of the family. Fourth is emotional support. This is slightly different. The care and support is more material, but this one is emotional, right? You know how your parents, rather than berating you for mistakes you make, they'll always be like, oh, it's okay, I can buy another one, kind of. Of course, you know, parents can be nasty too, but ultimately they do provide emotional support, ideally speaking, okay? Because there are some situations where children are abused, right? Physically and verbally, right? Socialization was talked about. You know, when it comes to sort of family abuse, when I was growing up, physical punishment was the norm. Everybody, you know, every parent did it almost, and every child, you know, was, I would say, of course, I'm exaggerating, but let's say practically everybody was subject to physical punishment, even at school, okay? But not anymore. So we've come afar, in just what, 1-2 generations, right? Where physical punishment at school is definitely no for sure. Physical punishment at home is still sort of taking place, sort of hidden, right? Done in a very secretive manner. Sexual control, and there is incest taboo, right? We teach our children, and you know, there is a social norm that ensures that you know, sexual relations take place outside the family relations. Seventh, recreation, right? So with family, you have lots of fun together, ideally speaking, right? Maybe I should save this for the discussion period, but is the function of the family different for males and females? I just entertain one comment from a student, if you have any comment to make. Even though you may not be ready to, you know, express anything specific, you sort of get the idea that it's somehow different, right, for males and females, right? Okay, think about it, and be a good student. Anyway, let's move on to the next perspective. So the first one, I hope you know by now what functionalist perspective is all about, right? So it looks at, again, all these parts of a given sort of a social phenomenon as sort of interrelated, and each part playing a role. And so it ultimately looks at the positive functional aspect of a given phenomenon, right? So just to give you another sense of what functionalism looks at, poverty, is it a good thing or a bad thing? Just commonsensically. Bad thing, right? But from a functionalist perspective, it looks at what poverty does for society in a positive way. What does poverty, what kinds of functions does poverty serve for society? And what is one good thing about poverty? For example, again, according to the functionalist perspective, one would be that poor people will be willing to buy cheap goods or used goods. So the goods that you could throw away, like used cars, right? Poor people could buy them, right? And you know, poor neighborhoods, you know, are not throwaways. They do have owners. So owners could, you know, sell their you know, houses in poor areas to poor people, okay? And poor people are more willing to work for lower wages. That's the kind of a you know, perspective what functionalism is. And crazy enough, functionalism also looks at war in a positive functionalist way. War serves functions, right? And you could easily imagine what it does. For example, it leads to development of state-of-the-art technology, right? Which could be used for non-military functions, right? Like radar. Okay? What about the internet? That's from the military use first, right? So that's the kind of a functionalism. That's what sort of functionalism does. Okay? Now, this is so different. Okay? And so functionalism is sort of easier to sort of understand. This one, more complex, but it is more profound. Okay? And here's one. Social structures, or let's say society. And I hope you really, let's just say you memorize these so that when you look at society, or when you look at any social phenomenon, you sort of remember this idea. And what idea am I talking about? What is society about? See, society comprises of people, classes, or interest groups with differing interests and resources. And what do? They are in constant struggle for power or to get more of the limited resources. For example, in any given society, you have old people, young people, males, females, people with land, people without land, people who own shops, people who own factories, people who are workers, people who are managers, there are students, there are professors. So every group in society has its own interests, and they're always struggling to get more power and get more of the limited resources. That's what conflict perspective argues. I mean, that's clear enough for you, right? That must be the case for society, right? With the nationalist ideology that you've been fed with, you do have this idea of, like, let's say for Koreans, this sense of being a Korean. But once you're out of this Korea-Japan rivalry in soccer, or this kind of economic trade sort of a tension right now, once you step out of that, it's you and the rest of the other Koreans are always sort of in a way competing to get limited resources. So once you know this is happening in politics, economy, every sort of a social institution that you're being part of. So using this idea, what do you think the family is like? Is the family, look at your own family. Is it one where everyone has equal power? Or is it unequal? You think your mother and father have the same level of power? Well, some are shaking their heads, some are nodding their heads. But as a societal observation, the truth of the matter is that women have less power than males in the family. Okay? That's sort of a general observation, and I'll show you why that is the case. Okay? So again, well, I'm talking about conflict perspective in general, not conflict perspective on the family. Okay? So again, society comprises of all these groups, classes, people with different interests, and they're competing for power, and they are competing to get more of the limited resources, and ultimately who wins? Yes, and that stronger. So in the case of men and women, men have won in most cases until let's say today. And in the economic struggle, it's the capitalists, right, who have won over the workers, proletariat, right? And so the list goes on. So what's going on in society is often reflection of the interests of the elite. And that's what the conflict perspective argues. Okay? So, for example, who is from the United States again? So don't think I'm blaming or accusing or sort of criticizing the United States, but who decided that no matter how much you earn, including Bill Gates and Warren Buffett, is that how you pronounce his name? Buffett? Buffett? You know, he's making like billions of dollars every year, but the highest income bracket is fixed at 33%. Was it you who decided that? Or the massive middle class individuals? So that's the exact point made by the last sentence there. Okay? So the decision to charge only 33% tax rate to even the highest earning individuals was made by the elite, not an average, ordinary American. So that's the point made by conflict perspective. And I don't know if there's anybody who would disagree with this, right? So if you use this perspective, can law truly be sort of equal? You know, when you look at the statue of law everywhere, right? They have this, a lady sitting down blindfolded with a scale that is sort of evenly held, right? Symbolizing how before law everyone is equal. But I'm not going to get into how the courts ultimately hand down their judgments, but at least one good thing about the American legal system is that they have a jury system, right? It's really a wonderful system, I think, even though it had some drawbacks with the manipulation of jurors, but still, the idea that the sort of how criminals, in the judgment of their crimes, a judge, just one person, making an ultimate judgment on the criminal, according to the advocates of the jury system, is that it should be in the hands of, let's say at least 10, 11 people who represent the public, okay? So it really prevents a judge from making mistakes or being bribed by, let's say, the criminal, him or herself, or the lawyer representing the accused, right? Anyway, let's move on. So, conflict theory argues that every society is plagued by inequality based on social and economic differences among the dominant group and all of the other groups in society. So it draws attention to power differentials. Okay? I think I talked enough about the conflict perspective, but let's now turn to family. Okay? So remember, for the functionalist perspective in the family, the focus was on what the family does for individuals in the family, right? But this one, so it's about inequalities in power and authority, and because it does reflect larger social structure, right? And so according to conflict perspective, family is really where power struggles do occur often. Right? So it could be power struggles among siblings. It could be between husband and wife, or between parents and offspring, right? And you could disagree with this. The idea here is that the person with the most access to valued resources have the most power. And what is the most valued resources here in the capitalist society? Money. And you know, now, yes, we have majority, large, should I say large majority, but at least what, 60-70% of women in developed countries also working. But back in the 1950s, you know, 1940s, less than half of housewives worked outside the home. And when that happened, you know, so even traditionally, you know, women played more nurturing roles, right? Taking care of the children, cooking and doing things around the house. But men played protective roles and hunting, and between the two, okay, which one was more valued? So I didn't want to say that, but at least it's something that you could agree with, right? And here's a little anecdote. Even this is even evident today, because we have, you know, tribes living in pre-industrial conditions, right? Let's say in Amazon or in let's say certain forests in some Asian countries or African countries. Hunting and gathering societies, we still have them today, right? If you observe how children and the whole village people react to what men and women do, you'll know what we mean by this. Okay, in hunting and gathering societies, women do most of the gathering. Okay, you know, picking up like vegetables and things to eat, like nuts and all that. Almost every day they do that, right? Now, men, on the other hand, go on hunting maybe every month. Now, when women come back home, you know, having gathered all these vegetables, do children or the families go, wow, vegetables, do they do that or not? Yes or no? Let's just take it for granted. Now, when men go on a hunting trip, come back in a few days with a catch, what happens? The whole village is in a festival mood. You know, clapping and dancing, right? This is one classic example of how things were like in the past. Okay? And that sort of continued in the capitalist society too. Okay? Again, not as much as what you see here, because again, in developed countries, between 60 to 70% of married women do work outside the house. Okay? And sadly, you know, if women who are married, who work outside of the home, if they are working because they want a career, that's wonderful. But studies have shown that more women are working to actually make sure that they are not behind payment on the house, kind of. It's more of a necessity rather than, you know, that working, after getting married is, you know, again, if it is a career building, something that women want to do, it's, you know, lovely, right? But the reality is, studies have shown that a lot of women work because they have to, and not because they want to, right? So, according to the conflict perspective, traditionally, what men did for the family was appreciated more. So they, had more power over women, and even in capitalist society, even if both men and women work, if men make more money, I don't know if that really translates into more power, but sort of an idea is there, right? So this is I'll talk about this 2 weeks from today when I talk about gender inequality. This is really it's really a robbery by society, right? Why shouldn't women be paid for all the work they do at home? Now, imagine if men doing the same load of work at home after coming back home from work, cooking, taking care of babies, and also ironing all the shirts and all these things that women do. It really will, I think, be disservice to capitalism, right? But what is true is that women's labor at home is unpaid, and that's according to conflict perspective, perpetuates this unequal power at home. Okay, this is maybe, well, you could take it, view it with a grain of salt. And this is a sort of an extreme view, okay? That family ultimately sort of reinforces the position of the ruling class or status quo. Family reproduces future workers, it reproduces future consumers, and so on. Okay? So look up conflict perspective. Isn't conflict perspective really interesting? It catches your attention right away? No? Okay. So we'll take a break after I go through this really quick. Okay. So we finally move on to the Korean family. Okay. So this section I call it characteristics of marriage and family in Korea. And the first one is marriage form. Do Koreans practice monogamy or polygamy? It's really a nonsense question in a way, right? Yes, they practice monogamy. And just to give you a sense of where the world is at, so the blue sky shaded areas practice monogamy, but navy blue, polygamy is generally illegal, but is sort of practiced and not really criminalized. And blue, wow. Oh, sorry, black. Black shaded areas, countries are where polygamy is permitted and practiced. So you can imagine that these countries are Islamic countries. Okay? Well, you could read the qualifications of these shades, different shades, right? Just wanted to throw that in to sort of express my sort of disappointment how same-sex marriage is never even talked about in Korea. Okay? I think Taiwan recently legalized same-sex marriage, but we live in a society where sort of the whole issue of homosexuality is sort of hidden, sort of swept on the carpet as if it does not exist. And I don't know how long this will continue. Because, you know, if you consider the administration, Moon Jae-in administration as being most progressive, one area that it does not touch on is this, okay? And it's really disappointing. Age at first marriage is this. So this is as recent as you can get. As of last year, age at first marriage was 33.2 for men and 30.4 for women. So these are the highest ever. Okay? So here's a really nice figure. I like to say I made it myself, but I gotta be honest. My TA from last year. Anyway, if you just see this, it doesn't really provide you with a good figure. See, if you're a good student like me, when you see that, you go, is that really high or low compared to other countries? You see, because if you just see that, other than the fact that within Korea, yes, it's been going up, okay, ever since this particular data have been compiled. That is true, but it always makes more sense if you do international comparisons. So where do you think this stands? Sort of in the middle, high or low? It's not high, I don't think. So here are some figures. So average age of women at first marriage, oldest. This is from 2016. Barbados, first age at first marriage, 35.3. So that's like more than 5 years older than the Korean case, right? So all these countries higher than Korean average. Korean average, remember? 30.4, right? So, so we're sort of in the middle, I would say. Okay, why? If you look at the average age of women at first marriage, the youngest, my God, look at this. South Sudan, 14.6. We're talking about Joseon Dynasty. Even, I think it was worse during the Joseon Dynasty. It was like 12, right? And when we say that, we're talking about Yangban, aristocrats. So if you're reading about Joseon Dynasty, and you have all these things about women, and if you don't remind yourself that those are observations made about aristocrats, not, you know, rank and file ordinary women. Because we had slaves back then, right? We had commoners. Okay? So these aristocrats, Yangban, made up only about 3% of the population up to the mid-Joseon Dynasty. But if you read all these textbooks or history books on Korean social life, they talk about these 3% of women as if they represent all of Korean women back then. It's a terrible, terrible mistake. Okay? So you gotta make sure you know that. Okay? And excuse me. Third characteristic of the Korean married family is the trends in average household size. So you can see how this is sort of reflective of how less and less number of Koreans are living with their sort of grandparents, right? And also the fact that we are having a record low fertility rate, right? So the trend would be this to actually even go down further. Fourth, this is a really amazing trend. Increasing trend of staying single. Okay? So by 2035, nearly 30% of men and nearly 20% of women in Korea between the age of 45 and 54 are expected to remain single. Why do we limit our observations to this age group? Anyone with a guess? Why don't we wait till like they're 70s or 80s or until they die to make this projection. Yes?
And when the final years when you're fertile?
Hmm?
When the final years when your eye is still fertile, when you're still...
Well, it could be true, but studies have found that people who don't get married by the age of 54, their chance of getting married is minimal. That's why they can make this projection that if people don't get married by between this age group, 45 to 54, their chance of staying single is almost 100%. There may be some exceptions, but very little. So here's a really, really amazing graph that really worries me as a concerned citizen. Okay? Look at this. 2045 is only about, what, 26 years from now. In 26 years, whopping 36.9% of males would not be married in that age group. And for females, 26%. And are they staying single voluntarily because they want to? No. Studies have found that it is involuntary. Okay? Because of lack of money or lack of having a good job. Okay? So I think without blaming them, I think we have a situation where our expectations of a job that is, our expectations for life and everything is just seems to be a little bit too lofty. What are the qualifications of a good job? Or how much should you be making to feel that you have enough to actually marry, right? Yes?
It's only about marriage or also about, for example, qualification, having a relationship?
No, this is about marriage.
Okay.
And the situation is a little bit different with, let's say, Europe, where cohabitation is it's a thing, right? That you don't necessarily feel embarrassed or ashamed. But in Korea, it's still sort of thing where, especially women would not be openly say, "Oh, I'm living with someone," right? Still stigmatized. So this does not mean that many of them will be cohabitating. That's the thing. Yeah? Yes. Oh. Anyone else with a question? Yes. Oh, not a hand in. So here's a thing. Income and marriage possibilities, and this is real. This is based on data, right? So if you earn less than 5 million, 0.5 million, that is about $450 a month. The chance of getting married is this. But if you're making, this is female and male. Okay? And if you're making 6.2 million one a month, so that's about $5,500 a month, then your chance of getting married is this high, and for women, this high. But compared to men and women making only $450, you can see the major difference, right? So it's sort of okay for women to make not too much money, but for men, it's really a disaster, right? Birth outside marriage, yes.
I have a question. Is there a study done about how men view when their wife earns more money than them? And if there's something about that being considered when they want to marry someone?
One thing that is definitely happening is this, that young men, when they're looking for potential wives, they do, I've seen surveys showing that most men expect their wives to be working, okay? Because they realize they need double income to, buy a house. Because housing in Korea, or housing prices, is in comparison to a sort of average income, it's the highest in the world. Highest among the economically advanced nations. Okay? It takes, if you compare the average housing price and compare that to average income, it takes Koreans 12 years to buy a house. And when I say 12 years, I'm saying 12 years of money that you make without spending any money. Okay? In other developed countries like European countries, United States, it's only about 5 to 6 years. Okay? So you know, housing prices in Korea are just crazy. Okay? Birth outside marriage. I think when I show you the next graph, you'll be just so surprised. So out of all the birth taking place in Korea, what percentage of birth do you think comprise of birth outside marriage in Korea, roughly? Is it 10%, 20%, 30%, 50%, 60%? This is an easy question. Is birth outside marriage sort of welcomed by Korean society as a whole?
Quite low, but I don't know what the rates in other countries, so I'm
Okay.
not sure how much it is.
So what about, what the rate do you think is in Netherlands?
I think the rate is quite high because qualifications,
Right.
so not high parents.
So when I show you this, you're going to be really shocked. In Chile, whopping 71% of all birth comprise of birth outside marriage, meaning, not married, or maybe even teenagers too, right? So you can see how most of the European countries with high cohabitation rate, you can see actually close to a majority of all the birth happening in Europe comprise of birth outside marriage. Okay? Where's Korea? 1.9. Okay? Single mothers forever live in shame. That's really sad, right? Yes. Can you speak a little bit louder, please?
Is marriage particularly expensive in Korea?
Well, it's all about housing, right? Once you get married, you sort of want to have your own house. I mean, if that's impossible, you go for jeonse. You know what jeonse is? It's a 2-year lease for which you pay anywhere between $50,000 to $500,000 just to live at a place for 2 years. But a good thing about jeonse is that you don't pay any money. You just give the landlord the lump sum, and after the 2-year period expires, you get the money back. Okay? So if you have the money, it's a good system, right? But so I think because we live in a culture of jeonse, if you don't have money for jeonse, you don't really feel you're ready to marry. Because if you decide to get married and with the kind of a financial situation you're in, you could only afford a monthly rent. In the Korean sort of a psyche, that's a no-no. That sort of is a sign that you don't have enough money. Okay? In order for anyone to say, oh, you're ready, you've got to have at least this lump sum amount of money, let's say $50,000, so that you have a chance to go to. Yes?
It's actually a question related to jeonse in Korea, but I barely know about it. So, then how these homeowners actually make money out of the rent if they have to pay lump sum amount of rent back to the residents?
Oh, so you're talking about the landlords?
Yeah.
Well, they get the money, right? Let's say the landlord gets $500,000 as a chance sum for 2 years. Now with that money, the landlord could put that money in the bank and collect interest, or maybe she could or he could serve as a private banker where she or he lends money to friends and earn higher interest. But by the time the rentee or renter has to move, you know, the money has to be given back. But that could be no problem because new renter will come up with the same amount of money, if not higher. So he could just give the money without using his own or her own money, right? All right.
Can I ask another question?
Yeah.
How are the abortion laws in Korea?
It's illegal. It has never been illegal. I mean, it has never been legal. But I'll show you a shocking data when we talk about aging. And according to that particular data, we could easily assume that millions of female fetuses have been aborted during the height of abortion in Korea, which is about from the 1970s to the early 2000s. How do you know there must have been abortions taking place, widespread abortions? How do you know that? There's no evidence. There was no mass grave that was dug up to show all these female fetuses. But how do we know that there must have been widespread abortions? Yes.
Much more men than women.
Okay, that's the right answer. We have sort of a sociological index that is named, that is a sex ratio, right? So if you look at the number of males per females, what kind of a figure should you have as a whole? Right. But there are more males. And the only way that is possible is if a lot of female fetuses have been aborted. Okay? So we'll talk about that when we get to aging in Korea. Endogamy and exogamy. These are terms from anthropology. Endogamy is a practice in which the members of a village, for example, marry with other members of the same village. So it means marrying within. Okay? So the other term is exogamy. Okay? When in traditional societies, in order to forge an alliance, you intentionally married someone from outside your village so that the villages could sort of form an alliance and sort of be in peace, right? Now, endogamy in today's sort of climate means marrying someone who is like you, okay? Status-wise, sort of a. So in today's time, it means you marry someone of the same race, for example, same ethnicity, someone who has the same religion, who is of similar age, and maybe even similar educational attainment, right? And of course, social class is also an important matter. I mean, I'm talking more from a Korean perspective, right? Let me ask this to foreign students. For considering someone for cohabitation or marriage, is education an important issue? what about where he or she got his degree from? Now, see, in Korea that matters. Okay? Okay, so someone with a college degree, not really wanting to settle down with someone with a high school diploma is sort of a maybe universal. But I think Korea is unique in that, you know, you also look at the person's alma mater. Okay? So that's, I think, unique, right? So what is practiced in Korea is endogamous marriage. Koreans marry partners who are of similar age, similar educational level, same religious background, and similar religious background. And you know, it has sort of this family roots, right, where you're raised to actually pursue an endogamous marriage, and you're too young to actually feel this pressure. But I think when you get a little older and you're reaching this sort of a marriageable age, and I think you'll get your earful from your parents how you should always look for someone who is more like you, right? And how love means how love does not really mean much, but it's about the person's potential success, the person's job, and the family, and also how much money he or she has, right? But my advice to you, love rules. You know, just to share with you a personal story. I met my wife while I was a student, okay? A PhD student. And she was raised to meet someone who is rich, who has a nice job, who comes from a nice family. Then she met me, jobless, because I was a student, right? I didn't come from a rich family. I was 8 years older than her. I lived in Canada. So guess what happened? Her family locked her up. I mean it, locked her up. It was not like, hey, you are grounded. It was really, literally, she was roped to a wall so that she cannot meet me, right? So this happened for like a month. So she lied to her parents that she'll break up with me. So she met me and we dated for a few more months. And then I had to go back to Canada to finish my degree. But then I was already in love, right? So all my thoughts were in like Korea, because the fear of losing her. Why? Because she lied that she broke up with me. Guess what happened? Every weekend, her parents, you know, made these arrangements for her to meet all these men, and they all had jobs, they all had money. So I was like, oh my God, what would happen? You know, because I'm, I guess, mature enough to know that if a woman changes her mind, for whatever reasons, that's it. You cannot turn back her mind, right? I mean, at least I knew that much. So I knew that I was in real big danger of losing her. So when I went back to Canada, I don't think I've studied that hard, you know, in my life. Why? I had to finish my degree fast and, you know, get her so that I don't lose her, right? Not only was she like meeting all these men every weekend, she was also having a very hard time because, you know, she was sort of caught in between, right? She was in love with me, but then social and cultural pressures and also the family pressure to, you know, actually meet someone who could take care of her better financially. So she went to this fasting prayer center every time she could. You know what fasting prayer center is? You go for like 2-3 days, and while you're there, you cannot eat anything. You fast, and you pray. So you could imagine this worry that I had. So I really studied hard. I think I slept like 3-4 hours every day, just because all the time I was like writing my dissertation, you know. So as soon as I was finished, I took literally the next flight out to Korea, and you know we were reunited, and so I didn't get a job as a professor in the beginning, right? I just got just a regular job, just to get the permission from her parents, right? So I said, hey, I got a job, I could feed my family now. So I got their blessing. And guess what happened at the wedding? Who usually cries at the wedding? Brides, right? But at my wedding, I was the one who cried. And it wasn't just like tears in my eyes. It was really loud cries. You know, sobbing, right? Actually, the whole wedding turned into a sobbing party. I don't know why others cried, but I had my share of crying. So anyway, if you take surveys in Korea asking young people, what are the most important criteria in deciding like on who to marry? Do you believe this result? Do you think love counts in the top 5? It doesn't. Sometimes it's not even included in the survey. Okay? But what is the most important? But to the same question, what are the most important criteria in marrying someone in the West? The answer is, what's the top answer? It's love. Second top answer? Love. Third top answer? Love. So I hope I really want to say this to Korean students, right? When it comes to marriage, the worst mistake you can make is to marry someone you don't love. Okay? And don't ever get fooled by your parents saying, oh, you know, you live with someone, love will naturally grow. That is a pure BS. Okay? It doesn't grow. Okay? Of course, you could, yes, have that empty shell marriage, okay? But love has to be real. Okay? All right. That was my 2 cents on love. All right. I mean, these are exaggerations, of course, but I think even in the West, right? Yes, sort of material considerations are becoming more important. Is that true? Material considerations are still, I mean, not as important as in Korea, but they're getting more important in the West. Or just, is that something that's happening more in the USA than anywhere else? I don't know. Yes?
Is dating culture also covered in this topic? Dating culture?
This is more about marriage. I mean, with dating, it's slightly different, right?
The concept of 선부다?
Yeah.
Is that called blind dating? I don't know if that exists or not.
Sort of son. We have 2 types of like blind dates, right? One is casual, like arranged by friends, but more formal arranged meeting, usually done by parents. So in the past, parents of both sides, so 6 people actually met, okay? And that is called son, okay? But even like now, you know, parents may arrange a meeting, but it'll still be 소개팅, right?
And that takes into consideration wealth and background and everything.
Yeah.
So my question was, can we still do that among friends, in the form of scripting and more casual, and that leaks into perpetuates into dating culture? I was wondering if that exists abroad
Oh.
among Westerners.
So her question is, for non-Korean students, is your dating culture like Korea, where even blind dates, you're saying? So,
Your alma mater. Your like we consider your level, like your educational background, what you've done, whether you've scored high internships, whether you're smart enough, like that kind of stuff. I was wondering.
okay, so we have a response.
I feel like, in my experience, this is only still the case in Europe, West Europe, only amongst like the really, really rich families, but like 99% of the other people, it doesn't really matter. Like, and I think most, as far as dating goes, it's mostly arranged by one of the two people who are dating themselves, not even by family, not maybe friends, but not by family at all. Like parents are staying outside of it, in my experience. But.
Okay. What is?
Online.
Oh, online dating.
Especially so like, say like if my friend arranged for me to have a date, and it'd be by like personality and interests. But like obviously stuff like education and like money and stuff still matters. But I know, say in my region especially, like a lot of us tend to have family and stuff, so money does matter. Like having a job and stuff, like if you don't have a job then it's kind of like no. Like even like dating and stuff, it's still kind of like no, because you're seen as not going anywhere in life.
So maybe this is my exposure to Western culture, where really when I was your age, it was really about the person and not the person's social status or how much the person makes. So that's why when I said love, that's what really mattered. That was the only thing that mattered, and that's what I teach my children. And not that he or she, fall for someone, without job, even though the person he or she wants to marry is like a 30-year-old. All I'm saying is, just because the person she wants to marry, in the case of my daughter, wants to marry, comes from a family who's not as rich as I am, meaning the same level, that's not an issue at all. And what if she meets someone who has a degree from a lesser, so-called less prestigious university? It doesn't matter. And I hope young people in Korea are different from their parent generation, because look at your parents. Are they really that happy? Okay. Yes, they may be happy shopping. Okay. They may be happy driving a fancy car, living in a nice house, but are they really, really happy inside, right? Or they may be falsely happy because they think their life purpose is to live in luxury, and if that's what they got, they may sort of have this false sense of happiness, right? But ultimately it's about happiness, and sort of ask yourself, what should I do to make myself be happy, and what shouldn't I do to avoid being unhappy, right? All right, let's move on. Extended family and the elderly. And what proportion of the Korean elderly do you think live with their children? Meaning, I mean, this is the best way of, sort of trying to find data on the extent of extended families in Korea. So don't base your judgment or guess on all the soap operas you watch. I'm talking about Korean soap operas. Have you ever watched any Korean soap opera that did not feature an extended family? I mean, that's how rare it is. If you have a family setting anywhere, there's always a grandmother or grandfather or grandparent. So you sort of think that it is universal, right? So what proportion do you think of elderlies in Korea live with their children? Roughly? 2/3, half, 1/3, 20%. Take your pick. I can't wait too long. So only 1% of the elderly in Korea lived with their children. So that's, I'm sure, lower than what you expect or what you anticipated. But it's been, you can see how the proportion has been decreasing, right? It was 54.7% in 1994, down to 42.7% in 2002, 38% in 2008, and so on. Okay? Question is, why do some Koreans live in extended families? Is it because they're born with extended family DNA? So, hand there first. Yes.
So most of the families who are living in that extended form actually consist of two groups. First, share their houses with the elderly, so that they don't have to invest extra expense on housing, and the other is for child.
Okay. So child support or child care. Yes.
To be able to care for the elderly, or to care for their grandparents if they slightly ill or something. Maybe that's able to depend on.
Okay, so to care for the elderlies who may not be fully mobile, right? Yes.
And respect in general, to like show their parents in that case that they still respect them and are ready to take care of them as well.
In other words, mama boy. Just kidding. Could that be called a mama boy phenomenon? Just kidding. Yes.
Well, in soap operas, grandparents are always micromanaging the children because they don't like how the parents are too modern and like raising them. So like the grandparents want to raise the children right. So by living with them, they can like manage them.
You know, if you watch soap operas and you find some overbearing grandparents, you know, they could do that because they have money. But if they don't have money, they're not as voiceful as others. Yes.
I mean, just to add, it's my very personal experience in my family, but in case of my family, my grandparents feel that if my parents do not live with them, feel that they are irresponsible or not responsible enough. So that can be good.
So let's see if what I have here covers your case. Yes.
In my case, it's more like the little time, like just like what you said, like my grandparents invested so much to my father, so my father has to invest back to them. Have to take care of them and show respect and like give back to what they have invested.
Okay. All right. So thank you. So let's see what I have. So one is economic factors. So this is quite a good reason for many families. So when parents and children cannot afford independent household economies. Second is practical considerations. So one is childcare. Second is elderly care. Third is normative factors, and this is where like the sense of obligation, it's the right thing to do. My parents did so much for me. I have to return the sort of the favor kind of, right? Did I go too fast? So practical consideration, economic factors. You know why I have number 1 in white shade, but number 2 in blue shade? Mistake. Number 3, normative factors. And number 4, affective factors, it's called. I think this is rare, right? So would you say your parents are this type? So your is more obligation, right?
Yeah, I think it falls into
Number 3.
yeah.
Okay. Who have a higher level of life satisfaction? I don't know. So I should have made the question more clearly. Between the elderlies who live with their children and elderlies who live on their own, studies have shown that elderlies who live on their own have higher life satisfaction. Okay? So even though you have, people living in extended settings for these reasons, but more people are living together in extended family settings for these reasons. And these are often not something of choice, right? Okay, next is divorce in Korea. And I better speed up things. There are few methods of calculating the divorce rate, but the 2 most popular ones are first, ratio of divorces to marriages, and second, crude divorce rate. So you're familiar with this, right? So the ratio of divorces to marriages, you calculate this by looking at the number of divorces in a given year and also compare that to the total number of marriages in the same year. So if this is not clear enough, I'll give you a question. Let's say last year there were 300,000 marriages in Korea. And last year there were 150,000 divorces. What's the ratio of divorces to marriages? I mean, this is a very easy mathematical question. Again, if there were 300,000 marriages last year in Korea, and there were 150,000 divorces, or 50%, right? So that's the kind of a, it's been very popular to, societies have used this method for a long time, but more recently, this is being more used, okay? It looks at the number of divorces per 1,000 population, and this is also sort of imperfect. Why? In this 1,000 population, even children are included, okay? Babies, okay? But both do show or reflect the trend of divorce rates, okay? And the rising divorce rate in and outside of Korea goes like this. The divorce rates have been increasing in many parts of the world. So just to give you a sense of how widespread this is, I don't have figures for, of course, every country, but you can see how these countries in I guess one country from Europe and the rest is America, but you know that you see it's been increasing, right? Right? with the United States sort of outpacing other countries. And if you look at England and Wales, same thing, right? It's sort of noticeably increases, right? Although there are some sort of noticeable decline. And what about Korea? Maybe this is a slight exaggeration, but it does boast at least one of the Asia's highest divorce rates. Roughly about 1/3 of marriages end in divorce in Korea. So divorce rates jumped as high as nearly 7 times in the last 50 years. And this is universal. Women, initiate divorces in about 2/3 of all cases. Okay. So crude divorce rates in Korea looks like this. So in 1970, it was only 0.44 out of 1,000. Okay, but it reached its peak in 2003 at 3.4 per thousand population. But it has stabilized at around 2.1. Okay? Is that high or low? So here are some countries with rather high divorce rates. Again, crude divorce rate. So Russia leads the pack with 4.7, followed by Guam, 3.6. So South Korea is sort of a, if it is ranked like 25th out of like 195 countries, it must be one of the higher countries, right? So countries with lowest divorce rates per thousand population include like countries like Peru, Qatar, Ireland, right? So maybe, Peru is a very Catholic country. Maybe, that has something to do with the low divorce rate. Same thing with Ireland, right? So Korea, as you can see, around there, right? Now, what's interesting about the divorce rate in Korea is this. What is called twilight divorce. You know what twilight divorce is? Twilight divorce is a divorce involving those who have been married for more than 20 years. Now, do you think this is universal? The rise in twilight divorce? Or after about 20 years, you pretty much gave up on trying to change the other person or sort of accept things, right? Yes or no? I mean, not Korea, but in the world. Do you think, after, let's say, you calculate divorce rates for those who have been married for 1 to 4 years, 5 to 9, 10 to 14, 15 to 19, 20 years plus. Which length of marriage is associated with the highest divorce rate all over the world? Oh, did this and did that, and I deserve to divorce my wife, or if it happens to be the wife who initiated the divorce, oh, my husband did this and did that, please grant me a divorce. So here we go. So let's say a woman or a husband or wife went to a court asking for divorce, saying, our religions are different. Do you think the court or the judge ruled in his or her favor or not? Yes. This is a real case. Husband addicted to online games. So that was the reason why the wife was asking for divorce. See, with this kind of, you don't have an appeal. Okay? Yes. Wife not providing adequate care for the family due to her commitment to her faith. Yes. Oh, it's all yes. Refusal to perform ancestral ritual. I think it's no. Oh, it's yes again. Husband who invested a large sum of money without wife's consent and lost. Oh my God, there's got to be some no, right? Wife not being courteous to her father-in-law. No. I think the next ones are sexually oriented. Please bear in mind. These are the ones which made the news because they were sort of sensational. Okay. Husband who is addicted to gambling. Yes. Okay, I think the next three ones. Couples who had no sex for 7 years. Yes. Man asking to have sex too often. So this one obviously initiated by the wife. Yes. Refusal to have sex. No. So I'm showing you these cases to highlight how ridiculous it is. I mean, put yourself in the shoe of a person who ever, brought this particular case to the court. When you were getting married, all you had to do was to sign, this document, but dissolving it takes all these extra steps, which, from my view, which violate human rights. Okay? And let me tell you this really crazy story. I just have that in Korean. There's a newspaper article title. You know why this is a really crazy story? This woman was found murdered. Okay? And the investigators, did their investigation, and of course, when someone is found murdered, what do? They talk to the next of kin, right? The immediate family, especially the husband, and friends, and they found out that she was close with this female friend, who have been close friends for like 10 years. Okay, so they dug and ultimately. Her friend of 10 years was charged with murder. And guess why her friend murdered her friend of 10 years? You see, this murderer wanted to get divorced from her husband. But she could not find any fault. I mean, the kinds of 7 grounds. He wasn't cheating. He was not an irresponsible husband. He was not a violent person. So she had no grounds to divorce him. So she tricked her friend of 10 years to have sex with her husband. So that now she has grounds, right? That he was unfaithful to her, right? So she had everything set up. Then why did she kill her friend? She was worried that she'll tell other people. Because she asked her to have sex with her husband so that she could divorce him. So the friend who was murdered knew the whole story. But this murderer was worried that she would go around telling people that she, had sex with her friend's husband because her friend wanted to divorce her husband. Isn't this really crazy story? All because of at-fault divorce. Okay? Again, just imagine being stuck in a terrible marriage, and you want to get divorced, and he or your husband or your wife, you cannot find any fault with him or her. Then you're stuck. Is that a law that looks up to your rights? I don't think so. That's why we have what is called no-fault divorce, right? It just Even if you just say, after 1 year of marriage, you say, oh, I don't love him or her anymore. That's good enough, right? And I think that's the way it should go. Okay, I gotta move on fast. So you saw how Korea's divorce rate is one of the higher ones, right? So we're going to talk about the reasons why divorce rate in Korea is rather high. So I'm not talking about these obvious ones, right? Like incompatibility. That's really like a number one reason for divorce. But they, you know, go back home, and you know, like. Researcher would ask them, "Oh, so your husband is abusive. Why don't you then divorce him, or, you know, try to be independent?" Why do you think they go back to the house where abuse takes place? Number one reason is that they're not financially independent. So there is a saying that if every woman, you know, in the 20s, 30s, 40s, and 50s has financial independence all over the world, divorce rate all over the world could easily skyrocket. Okay, so financial independence is a real important factor for you know, women's decision to, you know, get divorced or not. Okay, you sort of know more about you know, sort of life chances, you know, possibilities than your parent, your mother generation. So, and it's about being aware, right? So if you're stuck in an unhappy relationship, you sort of know what to do. Whereas I think your mother generation was sort of more passive, right? And sort of not really knowing what to do in a way, right? And so this is already talked about. I hope that someone would mention this, but you know, I think individualism is definitely sort of taking it's definitely a growing influence, right, on each individual, right? We want to sort of prioritize our needs, our happiness first, than anything else, and that's what individualism is, right? Your own happiness, your own achievement, sort of placing yourself before anything else. You know, whether it's family or your spouse. Your own happiness is the ultimate. Although I don't have time to talk about this, but please look into this phenomenon by typing empty shell marriage or show window couple. Okay? And I don't know if you type this in English, you'll get any results because it's a Korean expression, ghost couples. Scary, right? Ghost couples. But definitely the most popular one is show window couples. Okay? Empty shell marriages. So learn about the characteristics, why they, you know, why couples still remain in marriage even though they don't love each other, kind of, right? Thank you.